the shelf life of a skill set?
Shelf life is an older term, Daksh. Now they're saying, what is the half-life of a skill? So at BITS Pilani Digital, we are actually creating portfolios of work. Because for a very long time, we have been imparting education to working professionals across industries. And many of those working professionals couldn't really leave their jobs. And we've created this beautiful ecosystem of digital labs.
It is enough for the students to learn after we have taught them something. This essentially means that the teachers have to keep learning on their own. They have to experiment as well. That's a new part that we are bringing in BITS Digital.
Welcome to BITS Pilani Digital and TUI present Learning Reimagined. Today we are honored to host two trailblazers in digital education. Rajiv Tandon, CEO BITS Pilani Digital and Industry Research Partnerships at BITS Pilani. Rajiv spearheads the development of flexible and accessible digital learning models. He also leads the Institute's effort to build high-impact research collaborations that drive innovation. Previously, he served as the CEO of BITS Pilani's work-integrated learning programs, scaling it to over 45,000 working professionals annually. With over 30 years of leadership experience, including roles at NIIT and IMT, Rajiv brings a powerful blend of academic vision and industry insights to the future of education. During his long-standing career, he has performed many strategic education leadership roles in India as well as several key international markets, such as the US and several major countries in Latin America, Asia Pacific, and Africa. Professor Shan Sundar Balasubramanium, Chief Product Officer, BITS Pilani Digital. An eminent professor and computer scientist with over 25 years of academic and product development experience. Professor Shan began his career in the US, where his research work laid a strong foundation for his future in academia and innovation. At BITS Pilani, Professor Shan has been the driving force behind some of the institution's most forward-looking programs, both for on-campus students and for working professionals. He's known for building transformative programs in areas like AI, data science, and immersive learning, all designed to boost employability and meet the changing demands of industry. Professor Shan, Rajivji, welcome to Learning Reimagined. First things first, we were talking about learning. It's a digital workspace today. Everything is shifting into a digital format. And when we talk about learning on a digital scale, how do we make sure that education at its core remains grounded and human at the same time?
So I think education, either digital or traditional, I think being human is, a core requirement. So it doesn't change very much, when you change the format. And we are extremely conscious of it because we've seen if you try to retrofit, something which was working in a traditional format blindly into a digital format, there's a chance that the human element might get lost. For example, I think the early stages of online learning was all about passively consuming content online. And now, if that's the way, online learning will go in the future, that human connect would be really missing. And I think particularly at BITS Pilani, where in our traditional model, we've been very, very focused on ensuring we remain human in the entire education experience. We've also designed the entire digital learning when we have shifted on the digital format to make sure that, that element is not lost. For example, we are making sure that learners are not passively consuming content. There is so much of opportunity that we've created to build, create, solve problems using the digital format. That means the learner is not just a passive consumer, but a co-creator in the process. There is also a huge thing about a supportive ecosystem. Because if you're learning online and you're learning, let's say, from your office or from home, we want to make sure, that you're not alone. Because otherwise it could be a very lonely process. And humans don't typically like being lonely. So there has to be a very, 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 I would say, empathetic, warm and a responsive ecosystem of mentors, teaching assistants, faculty who really understand that, the context that you're learning in could be different from what is there on the campus. So this whole human element has also been taken care of. Another is, this whole element of, people learn well when they do things. Now, because of technology, in fact, things which are not even possible earlier in a physical format. Because of technology, things like AR, VR and, elements like that, things like doing things from wherever you are using a computer has only become easier. So by all, including all these elements, we are ensuring that human touch, Daksh, is always there in the education experience.
Talk about human touch. You mentioned about the educators. How does one train educators? Also the next generation of learners. Their attention span is always under question. Keeping them engaged is always under question. So how does a generation shift of educators, adapt to this kind of a problem?
Yes, there's one part about training an educator to be on camera, to be able to speak to the audience and so on. There's also more of how do we kind of disseminate the same content but in a different format. That's about breaking a complex piece into smaller pieces, which has existed even in a classroom setting. But here you have to be conscious of the fact that the student is remote and there's a latency to it. You don't teach directly to the students, or you don't speak directly to the student all the time. So you're speaking today and the student may be learning it 2 days later or maybe a week later. So that has to be kept consciously when you're talking about, whatever you're talking about. When you're talking to the student is not there, but the student is going to consume at their own time, at their own space. And that has to be kept consciously in their mind when the teachers speak to the students.
Now, in this case, predominantly learning is going to take place in a digital format. And you spoke about content consumption. But then how do you make sure that learning is actually taking place at a practical level? Because it's not just theoretical or just a student consuming content digitally, but the practical aspect of things.
So, one is whether it is consumption or creation. I think today's learner wants to do things for where there is a clear reason why they are doing what they are doing. To ensure that people get that ample opportunity, we first actually went to the industry and we said, what is it that our learners would want to do? Not just forcing them to do things. And what we learned was everyone is looking at industry relevance. So our entire practical component, Daksh, has been designed around what people want to achieve when they get into a job, or they're already working, in terms of doing. And that was achieved by doing two things. One is what we call as project-oriented learning. And project-oriented learning, not that it is only suffixed at the end of the program, something which is done very, very intensively. So the whole approach of our learning, in fact, if you really ask me, the central aspect of our experience is project-oriented learning happening right from the first trimester. I'm sure people who have gone to colleges would realize that a lot of times, practicals or projects are only happening at the end. Here it is happening right from the beginning. So there are all kind of projects, apex projects, design projects, lab projects. So it is all about learning by doing and then retaining it. In fact, a very interesting thing which the industry told us, and that is what we are using even to encourage learners to participate, is industry said when people come to us with degrees and grade point averages, they are unable to ascertain how much the person really know. And they really want to see what kind of work people have done in across their 3 to 4 year college journey. So at BITS Pilani Digital, we are actually creating portfolios of work. So that encourages people to not just saying making doing practicals possible, but also encouraging them to do that through these kind of portfolios and multiple kind of projects. Now, how do you enable them? Yes, it is possible to enable them, because I think one thing I want to point it out is that BITS Pilani specifically has experience on that, because for a very long time we have been imparting education to working professionals across industries, and many of those working professionals couldn't really leave their jobs and come and do projects or experiments. And we have created this beautiful ecosystem of digital labs, virtual labs, remote labs, where you could engage from far end and can actually work on real equipment right from your home or office, or virtual labs which simulate a very safe experimentation for a student. So all that, I think technology allows it, and we have used a lot of imagination to integrate that in the experience. So that's how we're doing.
So it's basically more of outcome.
Yes.
You're making sure that what students are delivering at the end of their program, it's also in sync with what the industry really demands. But then another problem comes up today, which is the shelf life of a skill set, or a typical what do you say, relevance in the market. Now, how do you address that?
Okay, I'll quickly.
Sure.
One of my favorite areas. I think shelf life is an older term, Daksh. Now they're saying, what is the half life of a skill? I believe 40 years back they used to say half-life of a skill is about 10 years. Half-life basically means in how much time period 50% of the value of the skill you have uh, is, uh, is lost, or the relevance is lost. In tech skills, the space that we are very, very strong at is this has reduced from 10 years to 2.5 years. Now, in a scenario like that, every time you learn a skill and it get obsolete, would you be running to your university back and keep on doing that? I think that's where digital learning is going to play a huge role, because learning, unlearning, relearning is actually possible in a digital format or blends of digital formats versus what a traditional format could do. So I would say this whole half-life of skills and short shelf life of skill problem can really be resolved, by imaginative digital learning.
Is it possible for you to give me some examples? Because this is learning is an ongoing process, right? It's something that everybody does throughout their learning stage, their working stage. But then, how do you make sure that new technologies or new skill sets coming up in the market are also integrated in the program?
Right. It's not about actually integrating what is existing, but making the students think what they can do with it. So if at the end of the class the student thinks that I've learned 100%, then that student is going to remain ignorant. Okay. Yeah, delusional. So what we make sure is there's enough for the students to learn after we have taught them something, which means that we have to provoke them to do things beyond what is done in the classroom. Obviously, what the student does may not equate to what the outcome is in the industry, for instance. But the student would have thought about those options, maybe completed some of them, maybe not completed some of them, but the student has the ability to think about those things that are coming ahead of time. So this is the practice that we follow throughout. This is not a new practice. We are bringing it in BITS. This is a model that the students have to learn. That's a common theme across courses and programs in BITS. We are inculcating that culture into BITS Digital as well.
Mm-hmm. And how do you make sure that the educators or the teachers, in this case, are also updated with those relevant skill sets?
Yeah. So this essentially means that the teachers have to keep learning on their own. They have to experiment as well. That's a new part that we are bringing in BITS Digital, that we are saying that all the teachers also have to be adept at doing practical things. We can't just deliver lectures. They have to be adept at the practical things that they're trying to impart to the students. So if the student has to look ahead for 6 months, 1 year, and so on, the teachers have to look ahead a few years. So it's not teaching for teaching alone, just what is there and teach that, but look ahead and what can be done with what is taught, that the teachers have to go through that process as well.
When we talk about digital learning, digital itself it's not bound by geographies or by borders, right? But then learning on a digital scale can enable you to sort of interact with people who are not geocentric. So you can connect with anybody and everybody pretty much across the globe. Now, what kind of a program or what kind of initiatives do we have at BITS Pilani Digital that can enable learning which is not geocentric? Where maybe somebody from Tamil Nadu can interact with or work on a project together with somebody learning from Delhi.
So we essentially allow them to create their own groups, and the groups are formed online, so they're not confined to their own locality. Second thing is we kind of encourage them to do projects across teams, and these projects can be done in distributed fashion. We believe in actually distributed hybrid education than centralized hybrid education. So in this context, distributed will also mean a single team is distributed across multiple locations.
Now, in a digital or maybe in an offline setup, the traditional way of education and learning, there's every institute will have a sense of culture, where the management sort of imbibes into the students learning. How do you create culture on a digital level?
So, see, my sense is it is possible, to get remember this whole digital culture these days. People are absorbing culture from different sources. In fact, today they say that culture is being absorbed more digitally versus, from your immediate surroundings. I think that's the power of digital that we are making sure that is going. And plus, in the setup that we are creating, this is the experience that we are creating. It's not just about a teacher coming and teaching and somebody coming and consuming. There's a whole big ecosystem of student success and support. So culturally, what we want people to do and nudging them, towards that, lifestyle or how they study, when they study, what do they prefer. I think many of those messages and many of those practices are going through that particular ecosystem. So it is, for example, I think culture is happening in a cafeteria, in a campus. Okay. So we'll have similar collaboration spaces for these people. In fact, BITS Pilani, we are also going a little ahead. We are saying we are nationally distributed in terms of our campuses. So many of those elements we are bringing in our program itself. For example, we have a compulsory campus immersion every year. Okay, for in our programs, there's an opportunity. Okay, for people to come to there's a team that we are creating, which is all about campus connect for digital learners. That means they're looking at how to optimally get those connects in place. There are also very interesting resources in some of our campuses which we want our digital learners to utilize. But is there an ecosystem existing for it? Is there a structure for it? Are there teams and resources allocated to it? Only then it can be made enabled. And I'm happy to say we have done that. So all that investments, all that making sure that there is a structured intervention, there are people who are taking care of that, those experiences are given, and it is then eventually one BITS culture, right? Which goes whether you go to a campus or you study digitally, it is one culture which will get inculcated.
I would love for you to sort of elaborate on the infrastructure, the enablement of learning through technology, on campus. So this is an interesting point that you're mentioning, where students from a digital setup can come and they can compulsorily sort of meet and engage with faculty, other students, and really feel what the BITS culture sort of looks like. So if you could help me understand, what are the labs, the infrastructure, the kind of technologies that we're using to enable the digital space.
So let's say first the basics of learning. For example, our faculty is one of the most sought after people to learn from, right? So we are making sure there is very active participation of the campus faculty right in the content creation stages itself. You'll be surprised, like you have a studio here, Daksh. We have a studio like this and perhaps better, okay, in almost all our campuses. And the faculty from there, can whatever, teaching they need to do, a lot of engagement, a lot of content that they create, okay, is disseminated. The same, highly sought after faculty, their intellectual creation is leveraged, okay, by other digital learners. Then there are many elements like, for example, labs. There could be cloud labs where things are there in the servers inside the university campus. But can an access be provided? Yes. So you created digitally an access where there are people supporting a learner. Remember your own college lab. You go inside. There's a lab assistant. There's a guide. The same thing is also possible virtually. You can do this remotely. You can actually do this in a virtual manner. So all that infrastructure, converting it in a manner that you can actually access through an internet browser, is something that we are doing. Then, of course, I think students love extracurricular activities. So we are making sure activities on campus, as I said, in an optimal manner, we are ensuring that, people who are studying digitally are also invited. They also participate in the same. In fact, BITS is known for its extracurricular activities. We are also being a little bit more imaginative there, because digital today allows us to, conduct extracurricular and co-curricular activities also online. I'm not saying, that's what people have done in the past, but if you use your imagination, many competitions today, whether they're hackathons or people are creating their videos, and many elements can, the digital itself could be utilized. So it's an investment in infrastructure, but I think the bigger piece is imaginatively integrating it. Because if you just have infrastructure, how do you utilize it? I think the moot question is imagining it. How do you really integrate it in a digital experience? That's where, our focus has been.
Perfect. And if you could, also elaborate on a few success stories that we've had. Of course, the digital stage is now coming in and kicking in for us. But, how have alumni members of the BITS group have they created an impact which is which has sort of transpired from generation to generation? And do we see a shift in terms of looking at quality education rather than just accessibility today? Because online education is out there, it's been there for a while now, and there's an oversupply of online learning. But then we also want to focus on quality. So is there other examples that you can perhaps list out a couple of them where we can sort of see how BITS has really played an important role?
So practice school, which BITS is well known for, is an element that has carried over for the last 40 years across generations. BITS doesn't advertise it, but word of mouth has carried it through. So what it is actually our students spend, undergraduate and master students spend 1 semester in the industry, 1 semester in the summer in the industry, doing whatever the industry does. So they treat it as if they're like employees, but they're in the final year, let's say. So they are able to execute projects. Now, this program, all students of BITS are eligible for it. In practice, 95% of the students opt for it. They also have other options. They may do a thesis on campus and so on. 95% of the students opt for it. But we send faculty to guide and monitor and evaluate them as well. So that's a system which is integrated into the education. It's in the curriculum. Students get marks. It improves or affects their CGPAs in ways the performance matters. So that BITS has not advertised for it at all. But large number of companies in India actually take students from BITS and put them to work. While they learn, they get a stipend, and at the end of the day, they get a grade as well. But that also becomes an opportunity for a student to get a window to look into the industry, how it operates in practice, not just looking at it from outside, but the kind of part of the organization actually working there. So they get a glimpse of how it operates. If they were an employee, what would happen to them? They get to see that. Many of them get pre-placement offers there, but even otherwise, the exposure is is significant for a student. And the work in terms of what they are doing while we are training them to do it, they actually end up doing it. Now, this has a generational impact in the sense students of this generation go there. Next time the company comes to us and say, give us students, right? So this has happened over time. It started in 1978, 79. And even today, now we have become multiple campuses, 4 campuses, all 4 campus students, go to the industry, and there's a feedback, right? So that feedback goes to the industry. Okay, this batch was good. So next time we will take more students, or we will find other branches in which they are doing. So this has become a generational impact. Our alumni may or may not directly influence, but the fact that the students have gone there and they've established a tradition that they're able to work well, and that brings industry back to us.
You're talking about practical learning essentially, right? And you basically learn on the job. Just to take it forward from there, there's a huge wave of entrepreneurship which has come into India, and for good. How can entrepreneurship be taught online? Firstly, can it? And if it can, then to what extent? And how is BITS sort of helping digital learners?
So it's a tough question in the sense, even on campuses, teaching entrepreneurship is difficult. What is needed is to create a culture, which BITS has done very successfully. So Rajiv was earlier mentioning that thousands of our students are either CEOs or they have started up companies. You were earlier talking about Swiggy. Swiggy was founded by us, our students. But there are so many startups which have come from BITS. In today, in fact, this study I was just reading on LinkedIn by College Fund. So that has rated BITS as highest again. Last year also they were rated as the startup factory. Okay, the university that continues to lead in terms of entrepreneurship. There's so many startups. Students are setting up incubating companies in all the campuses in India, for instance. And then they, in turn, train the other students to do it. So subsequent batches, subsequent cohorts start their own companies. They're able to employ, students coming out or being employed with students already working there and so on. So this culture is important. So I can't say we'll teach them in the classroom. We are not, okay. But we have created a culture BITS as a whole has created a culture in all its campuses where students are encouraged, one, to take the path, not a beaten path, but an unknown path, okay, with risks. Students are encouraged to take risks. So these aspects form a culture, and that culture has been carried across campuses, carried across generations, and that's the reason BITS is known for startups today. It's not just we have taught in one course. Yes, there are classes actually. So I shouldn't say that. There are classes where there are classes called startups, start your own startup and things like that. Those classes are meant for somebody who wants to learn about that. How do I do venture funding? That they have to learn because students are not, used to handling money, right? So that's something technical. How to finance it, that's a technical thing. But the culture that has been created, as I said, this is more about doing things which are not known completely, doing things which you have not experienced completely, and taking risks. All of this and the people skills. Okay, so that's one of the things that BITS builds, that they're able to relate to each other. People from, it's engineering college, we have science and engineering students, but we also have students in economics, we have people who are studying humanities. So all of these people are able to come together, they're able to group their skills and then build a team. That's something that happens in BITS. So it's not that, the three people who are getting together all are, good mechanical engineers and then they will build an automobile. It doesn't work that way. You need people with finance skills, you need people with people skills, and you need people who are core engineers, and there are people who want to think, who have a scientific mind and they want to think long term. Okay, they're not even thinking about building a product today. But with these people, they band together and then think, okay, one person keeps thinking about long term ideas, but the others are able to build things. So this kind of teams are formed very organically in BITS, whether or not for establishing a company. That comes naturally. So they are doing this on a day-to-day basis. Then forming a company is a natural consequence. That's something they think, okay, so now we have learned all this, we have been together, we have been doing things together, why not form a company? So it's so natural.
I'll just give one good news on this. All our digital learners will also have access to technology business incubators on our campuses.
Oh, wow.
So if you're excited about entrepreneurship and you've heard a lot about what happens in BITS Pilani, you will get access, to all that support ecosystem which has been created. So I thought I must tell you that.
No, I'm glad you did, and I think, sir, you articulated your answer really, really well. I think there's a lot of things happening at BITS Pilani, and now the digital space is now coming in, and I'm sure that the viewers and the listeners and the next set of students are truly excited about this. Thank you so much for taking our time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Professor Shan and Rajiv ji. Thank you so much for this edition of Learning Reimagined. Thank you so much.